I'm Paul Harris. Gary Johnson was the governor of New Mexico, and when he was in that post, I had a long conversation with him on the air one day about his libertarian principles when it came to drugs. Drugs like marijuana, which, of course, has been in the news quite a bit over the course of the last couple of days because Washington State has now become the second state after Colorado to legalize recreational marijuana. And we've got nearly 24 states across the country, not including Missouri, that allow medical marijuana sales. So I thought now's a good time to bring back Gary Johnson, who, by the way, ran for the presidency in 2012. That didn't go so well, but he's been involved in lots of other things, and now I think wants to get into the marijuana business. He's got a new company called Cannabis Sativa, Inc. So, Gary, welcome back to the show.
Hey, Paul. Thank you for having me on. It's great to be on with you.
Are you still in New Mexico?
I am. I built my dream home north of Taos and live there because the skiing there is as good as anywhere on the planet, and that happens to be one of my passions.
Now, New Mexico has not legalized marijuana for recreational purposes. Do they have a medical marijuana law there?
They do, and it's very restrictive. But what we're betting on is that the whole country does, in fact, legalize marijuana, and I'll give that about a 10-year time frame. I'm believing that maybe there will be a couple of holdouts. Alabama, Mississippi come to mind as maybe the two holdouts.
Yeah.
And then as the U.S. goes, so goes the world. So we're really looking at a worldwide legalized environment here over the next decade.
Do you think this is a faction? Do you think that the legalization of recreational marijuana is a factor of changing attitudes about the drug, or other states seeing the huge amounts of sales tax revenue coming in Colorado, and they all want a piece of that for their own bottom lines?
Well, Paul, I think it's important to point out that the real savings or the real money generator for states is not going to be in taxes collected. It's going to be savings when it comes to law enforcement, the courts, and the prisons. I mean, that savings is going to dwarf any tax revenues from marijuana. You know, there are two sides to marijuana. One is the medical side, and I will tell you that when the whole medical marijuana movement raised its head, I really was skeptical that it had anything to do with medical as much as just allowing people to smoke marijuana that wanted to smoke it. Now, I back that because I think it's crazy that we would arrest people for arguably making bad choices. But that said, right now you have this CBD oil that does not contain THC. CBD oil is derived from the cannabis plant. You have kids with epilepsy that are absolutely finding relief and life using this CBD oil. All current medications do not work, are completely ineffective. CBD oil is given to kids with epilepsy, and whereas they were given a lifespan of 21 years old, now it's clear that they're going to be able to live their lives going forward using this oil. Well, in some states, this is still a Class 1 narcotic because even though it's CBD oil and contains no THC, it actually contains a microscopic THC doses, much like non-alcoholic beer still contains alcohol. So you have families right now that are literally packing up and moving to Colorado because their kids will be able to live. This CBD oil has been shown anecdotally to help with cancers, to reduce inflammation, i.e. pain taken orally. There needs to be research and development that goes along with the CBD oil, but in most states, it's still a Class 1 narcotic, much like Dallas Buyers Club. For those listening that saw the movie Dallas Buyers Club, look, there was a drug for AIDS that worked. The entire AIDS community knew it. They were using it, but they had to obtain it illegally. People were going to jail because they were selling it, and yet it saved lives. And FDA would have nothing to do with it. They had their tests, they had their way of doing business, and I think that this is much similar. back to the medical side of marijuana. Add THC to the oil, and now all of a sudden you have a direct competitor to oxycodone, relief of pain, which kills 100 legal prescription drugs kill 100,000 people a year. There are no known deaths because of use of marijuana. Now, I'm sure there are a few, but Paul, no documented cases. And then I'm going to keep yakking here because I don't hear you interrupt.
No, I'm listening. I'm fascinated. Go ahead.
Yeah. Well, and then on the recreational side, it's a bit of an oxymoron, but I am a 61-year-old competitive athlete. I remain a competitive athlete. When I first smoked marijuana when I was 17, the first thing that struck me was, wow, what a safer alternative than alcohol.
Mm-hmm.
I have not had a drink of alcohol in 27 years. I have always maintained that legalizing marijuana will lead to less overall substance abuse because people will find it as such a safer alternative than alcohol. And the products that we sell, Cannabis Sativa Inc., the products we sell are lozenges. You suck on them. So they're oral, non-smoking. And then there are two kinds of marijuana. One is sativa, which is a stimulus. The other is indica, which puts you to sleep. All marijuana sold illegally in this country since the prohibition of marijuana started has really been a combination of those two. When you separate those two and when you are able to consume, in this case, if you're able to suck on the stimulus, it ends up that you can clean your house with a smile on your face. And I'm trying to be humorous here, as opposed to going to sleep.
Now, there are a couple of parts of this story that I've got to talk about. One is my own personal experience. When I was in college, I didn't just experiment with it. My experiment was successful, and I found the fun of inhaling marijuana, whether it was through joints or a bong or whatever, or a pipe or whatever it was. And I did that for about 3 years. But I was also at the time starting my radio career and found that the act of smoking was really irritating my throat and was making me not be able to take deep breaths and affecting my lungs, etc. That's one of the reasons I stopped, plus the fact that I know in retrospect that I was just smoking too much dope as a college kid. That was simply a fact. But that was 35, 36 years ago. And now we talk about the lozenges that your company is making, or the edibles that they're selling in Colorado, but not in Washington. And I wonder if we're going to see a shift from people smoking weed to people eating weed.
That's exactly what is happening in Colorado right now. Edibles are outselling the smoke side of it. And, Paul, there's a real responsibility here that goes along with manufacturing these products, and that is to identify dosages so that I'm talking about something secondhand because I didn't actually read it firsthand, but Maureen O'Dowd, she goes to Colorado. She gets a 120 milligram bar of THC marijuana. Nothing happens. She ends up eating the whole bar. Well, she just ended up drinking a bottle of tequila as opposed to maybe just one margarita, which would have been a 10 milligram dose.
Right. And by the way, she had never used marijuana before, and as a first-time user, here she is not understanding what the dose should be and how much she should smoke, but also not having somebody around who could tell her, look, here's how you do this.
Well, right, and I don't want to pick on her at all because these are the issues going forward. But if you compare a 10 milligram dose of marijuana or a 20 milligram dose of marijuana to having a few glasses of wine, like I say, haven't had a drink in 27 years. But when you drink, when you have a couple of glasses of wine, you get to a point. And that point you get to, 20 minutes, 30 minutes. You get to this, wow, this feels great. But then 45 minutes goes by, and you got to recharge it. You got to have more to drink. In the case of these sublingual suck on our product marijuana, you know what? You get, I think, that with the proper dose, and again, maybe that proper dose is 20 milligrams, you get to that same euphoria, if you will. You don't have to recharge it, and it lasts for 4 or 5 hours. It's very pleasant.
As you know, the federal government still frowns on this, and that's frown with a capital F, even though it allows these 22 states to have legal medical marijuana, and now Colorado and Washington to have legal recreational marijuana. It is still a Schedule I drug, according to the federal government, and they still do crack down. The Obama administration has gotten a little bit better about this and isn't breaking up dispensaries in California like they were in their first few years, and maybe they've turned the corner on this, and Eric Holder, the Attorney General, has said this is not a priority for us to crack down on marijuana use anymore. But as this starts expanding from state to state to state, and companies like yours take off in more and more places around the country, are the federal laws going to have to be changed so that we don't have to worry about that anymore?
I think that what you've pointed out is the biggest issue surrounding this. Here you've got states that are taking the lead, and yet it's still a Class 1 narcotic, according to the federal government. And this is really insanity, but this is the big issue moving forward. Right now, about half the states have adopted medical marijuana programs. In every single one of those marijuana programs, marijuana that's sold in a medical marijuana state is marijuana that has to be produced or manufactured into edible products in the state where it's being sold. That's not a very efficient way of distributing these products. But going forward, these are legislative issues that will get worked out.
Well, they have to get worked out. The problem is that you've got legislators who won't even admit that they themselves have done it. Yeah, we have 2 presidents now who have admitted using cocaine, 2 in a row there. We've got 3 in a row who essentially have admitted smoking pot. We've got various members of Congress who have had serious prescription drug problems over the years, but they never will come out and talk about it in the first person. Instead, they continue to pass laws that will imprison people for doing the same stuff they did, which, by the way, if they had been caught doing it at the time, they would never have risen to the high office that they have. That's the kind of hypocrisy that has surrounded this failed war on drugs for too long.
Well, and that's what that's as human beings, that is the one thing that I think none of us can stand for is hypocrisy. And Paul, this is the biggest hypocrisy of all. How many politicians do you know that say that, yes, I occasionally smoke marijuana, or in this case, I think the notion of smoking marijuana is actually going to go by the wayside, given the alternative of being able to orally take these products. I think the world currently has and will have an aversion to smoking. As you pointed out earlier, look, it did something to your vocal cords, and you're in the radio business. Well, okay, we don't have to do that, but wow, what hypocrisy when it comes to drug policy. We have tens of millions of Americans in this country that are convicted felons that, but for our drug laws, would otherwise be tax-paying, law-abiding citizens. 90% of the drug problem is prohibition-related, not use-related. That is not to discount the problems with use and abuse, but that should be the focus.
I mentioned in my introduction that you ran for president as a Libertarian candidate in 2012. I don't know if you're planning on 2016 or have made a decision yet, but can you see a presidential candidate standing up at a debate in 2016 and being asked, are you currently using marijuana lozenges, or have you tried marijuana edibles, and saying, yes, I have, and I'm proud of it?
Well, that would be me, and for those that would say that, what's your response to the business that you're currently involved in? Well, maybe I'm the smartest guy that's ever lived. And by the way, having espoused legalizing marijuana since 1999, how about listening to some other things that I've said, like the Democrats, the Republicans, they're talking about reducing corporate tax to 32% or 31%. How about listening to what I have to say, which is abolish corporate tax, abolish income tax, abolish the IRS, balance the federal budget, and if you want to implement a tax, make it one federal consumption tax.
Well, that's a debate we're going to have to get into another time, Gary. But in the meantime, I wish you luck with the new company. I haven't had a puff of marijuana in more than 3.5 decades, and I have no intention of doing it again. But as a person who thinks that no government has any authority to tell you what you can put into your own body and arrest you and put you in jail for what you decided to put into your own body, I do think that our drug laws in this country need to be changed. I'm glad to see them changing progressively in places like Colorado and Washington. I fear that my home state of Missouri will be in the bottom 10% of states when it comes to finally getting around to doing the same, including medical marijuana. But I'm hopeful that the policies that you've talked about for so long will continue to progress forward here, and I hope your company's a big success too.
Well, thank you. And Missourians, if I've misspoken, I so apologize.
That's all right. Missourians is right.
Missourians have to be taking notice. Airport officials have to be taking notice that the airplanes bound for Denver for the weekend or Seattle for the weekend are full.
Yeah.
So, wake up. Come on, let's wake up. Let's wake up to reality.
Former governor of New Mexico, former presidential candidate, now CEO of Cannabis Sativa, Inc., Gary Johnson. Great to talk to you again. Thanks for joining me.
Great to be with you, Paul. Thank you very much.
I'm Paul Harris. This is the Big 550.